Have you ever felt like you were climbing a mountain covered in fog? No one cheering, no one watching, just you and the weight of your own breath. Each step feels like a silent promise to yourself. I won't give up. But then, the world around you goes eerily quiet. No one says, I'm proud of you. No one sees the battles you fought alone. And in that moment, you wonder, is this worth it if no one even sees me? It's in that silence that a different kind of strength begins to form, the kind that doesn't need proof or recognition. Carl Jung once said, all rebirth begins with dissolution. When there's no one left to lean on, it's not the end. It's the first signal that your soul is preparing for a new chapter, one where you become your own source of strength. This is the journey of those who don't wait for miracles, who don't wait to be saved. The journey of souls who have fallen, been left behind, yet still choose to rise. Because they understand that in the loneliest moments, the human spirit is remade, no longer the one seeking light, but the one who learns to ignite it. And when you realize that, you see, no one is coming to save me is not a curse. It's destiny's greatest gift. Because in that very moment, you stop searching for strength and become it. When the outer light fades, you begin to hear something else. A faint echo from within. At first, it scares you, because when there's no one left to fill the silence, you're forced to face yourself. No mask, no role, no one to blame, just you and the truth. Loneliness is not an empty room. It's the moment you realize the old world can no longer touch your soul. Even conversations that once made you laugh now feel hollow. People who once made you feel you belonged now speak a language you can no longer understand. On the surface, everything looks the same. Work, relationships, routines. But inside, another world is awakening. Carl Jung called this the night sea journey, the dark night of the soul, when a person must travel through the deepest darkness to find the true light, and loneliness is the teacher guiding you there. Most people fear this stage. They bury themselves in work, love, distractions, anything to avoid hearing the call of change. But the more they run, the emptier they feel. Because loneliness doesn't come to punish you. It comes to separate you from what has expired. I once met a woman after her divorce, where silence seemed to have a shape. At first, she hated it, blasting music, watching movies, texting endlessly to avoid facing herself. But one night, she turned everything off, sat still, and listened to her own heartbeat. She cried, and through her tears she whispered, I'm still here. In that moment, she was no longer the one left behind. She was the one who had finally found herself. Jung once said, no one becomes fully mature until they learn to be alone. Not when someone is listening, but when all outer noise fades, and you begin to hear the voice of your soul. Remember, solitude doesn't make you weak. It's the gym of the soul, where you learn to stand tall without anyone holding you up. And one day, when you look back, you'll realize those quiet months were when you were strongest. Once you've made peace with solitude, another realization emerges, that what exhausts you isn't loneliness itself. It's waiting for someone else to fill it. We grow up believing love will save us, that someone will come, see our worth, and make our pain lighter. But Jung once said, loneliness does not come from having no people around, but from being unable to communicate what matters most to you. When you depend on others to feel whole, every silence, every departure, every unanswered message becomes an earthquake. You think you're hurting because of them, but what really hurts is that you gave them the power to define your emotions. I once met a young woman in a group therapy session. She said every time her boyfriend didn't text back, she felt abandoned. She checked her phone hundreds of times, heart racing, hands trembling. After several sessions, she realized That fear didn't come from him. It came from childhood, when every time she was sad, her parents said, "Stop overreacting." Her subconscious learned, "My feelings don't matter." And as she grew up, she kept seeking someone to prove that she was lovable, worthy, seen. But no one can do that forever. Jung called this emotional projection, when we use others as mirrors to measure our worth. When they care, we feel meaningful. When they withdraw, we feel invisible. But the truth is, no one can be your emotional oxygen forever. True love begins when you can sit with your pain without running, when you can place your hand over your heart and whisper, "It's okay, I'm still here." That's the beginning of emotional independence, when you stop searching for someone to save you and start becoming your own savior. Not by closing your heart, but by opening a deeper relationship with your own soul. Because only when you stop outsourcing your emotional power can you truly love. Not to be rescued, but to walk side by side, in freedom and respect. Then comes a strange stage in this journey. After you've learned to be alone, after you've stopped waiting to be saved, you start taking action, working hard, showing up. And no one seems to notice. No praise, no validation. Every effort feels like it disappears into a void. And it's here that many give up. Not because they're weak, but because they're tired of continuing in silence. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." Because when you truly validate yourself, you stop hiding behind other people's eyes. You no longer need them to confirm your worth. You begin to feel it from within. I once met a woman at a training seminar. She was the hardest worker in the room, staying late, taking on the toughest tasks. But when it came time for recognition, someone else's name was called. She smiled, but her heart broke. One day she asked herself, "If no one sees me, can I see myself?" From that day on, after every project, she wrote down what she did well, not to brag, but to honor herself. Slowly, she no longer needed anyone to say, "I'm proud of you." She could feel it. In Jungian psychology, this is the shift from ego to self, when you act not for recognition, but as a natural expression of who you truly are. The world's silence isn't rejection. It's a test to see if you can keep walking without applause. Because in the end, your true worth is not in the eyes that watch you, but in the light you still shine, even when no one's looking. Remember, the only person who can make you feel enough is you. The one who's still here, still walking, still holding faith even in the dark. There will come a time when, even after you've become strong, learned to stand alone, stopped waiting, and learned self-recognition, life will still knock you down. Not once, but many times. Some falls will shake you so deeply you'll doubt your path entirely. You'll think, "I did everything right. Why does it still hurt this much?" But Carl Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." Because every collapse is a doorway, leading you deeper into parts of yourself you've never faced. When everything falls apart, the weak, proud, and fearful fragments you've been hiding rise to the surface. And that's not a setback. It's purification. I once knew a woman who started a business with all her faith. She poured her heart into it, only to be betrayed by her co-founder, losing her savings and her trust. In her darkest days, she said, "I fell into the abyss. But then I realized, from the bottom, there's nowhere left to fall. Only up." Instead of resenting life, she began to write. Every night she noted what the pain was teaching her, not as a victim, but as a student of life. A year later, she started again. Smaller, steadier, wiser. She said, "I finally understood. Falling isn't failure. It's the test to see if you truly believe in what you say. Like a seed, only when buried in darkness can it grow. Humans are the same. Every fall is not an ending. It's an invitation to return to your truest self. Jung wrote, "Mistakes are the foundation of truth." If you've never fallen, you've never met who you really are. So when everything collapses, don't curse your fate. Ask instead, what is this fall trying to teach me? And when you choose to learn rather than resent, the fire inside you will rise again. Not the fire of pride, but the quiet flame of someone who has fallen and learned to rise on their own feet. The quiet flame of someone who has fallen and learned to rise on their own feet. That's how you turn pain into power, not by escaping it, but by letting it refine your soul. Like gold forged in fire, like a seed finding light beneath the earth's darkness. And once you've learned to rise from your falls, life will bring you a new test, one with no applause, no inspiration, no light to follow. Just repetitive, ordinary, quiet days. And that's where most people stop. Not because they're weak, but because they confuse passion with discipline. Carl Jung once said, "Willpower is the energy that can restructure the entire soul." Willpower here is not force. It's the soul's capacity to continue even when emotion wants to quit. You've probably had those inspired moments. A morning full of energy, a night of ideas, a word of encouragement that ignited you. But then the feeling fades, like smoke. And if you only act when you feel like it, your life will be full of brilliant beginnings and no completion. I once knew a single mother working 2 jobs. Every day she woke up at 5 a.m., cooked, worked, and studied her passion at night. Some days she was so tired she didn't want to open her eyes. I asked, "What keeps you going?" She smiled softly. "Because my son needs to see that his mother never gave up." That's when I understood. Real motivation doesn't come from emotion. It comes from commitment. Commitment to yourself, to your purpose, to the path you've chosen. In neuroscience, when you act even without motivation, the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for willpower, activates. That action itself releases dopamine, not because you're praised, but because you moved forward. In other words, inspiration doesn't come before action. It's created by action. Emotions shift from day to day, but discipline is the red thread that keeps you steady when nothing else remains. Jung once said, "True freedom is when we joyfully do what we must. Not because someone forces us to, but because our soul chooses to. When you keep walking even though you're tired, keep writing even when no one reads, keep loving even when it isn't returned, keep promises to yourself. That is no longer the power of emotion. It is the strength of a soul that has been trained. And one day you'll realize it was in those weary mornings, those uninspired nights, that true character was born. Not in the light, but in the darkness, where you kept going even when no one was watching. After the falls, after months of discipline, you enter the quietest and loneliest phase. Not because you lack people around you, but because you've realized how few truly understand your depth. You speak of changes in your soul, and they look at you like a stranger. You talk about peace, and they call you cold. You choose silence, and they say you've become distant. And then you understand. Not everyone has the depth to see the journey you're walking. Carl Jung once said, "Those who truly understand you are rare, but it doesn't matter if they don't." Because one sign of inner maturity is when you no longer need to be understood to be at peace. I once met a young painter. After years of painting to follow trends, she fell into depression. One day, she cancelled all her contracts, rented a small wooden house by the lake, and cut contact with the world for a month. She painted, not for an exhibition, not for money, but to hear what her soul wanted to say. When she returned, her paintings were alive, wild, honest, not market-friendly, but powerful enough to move people to tears. A gallery in Berlin happened to see her work and invited her to exhibit. She told me, "It was when I stopped trying to be understood that people finally saw me." That is the paradox of life. When you stop trying to prove yourself, you begin to be seen. When you stop explaining so much to be understood, your presence itself becomes the answer. And if today you feel misunderstood, overlooked, or underestimated, remember, you don't need anyone to validate this journey. They are not you. They don't know the nights you've held yourself together or the mornings you rose when there was no reason left to rise. You don't need them to understand. You only need to stay true to your soul. Because once you've reached that inner stillness, where there's nothing left to prove, nothing to defend, you'll understand this. You don't need to be understood to be loved. You only need to be yourself. And when you live that truth, you become light, not the light that seeks attention, but the kind that guides others still lost in their own darkness. There will come a stage when you walk with discipline and strength, yet the world remains silent. No one says you're right. No one sees your battles. No one thanks you for trying. And in that silence, a familiar question returns. Does any of this matter? That's when the greatest lesson begins. Because when every compliment, every glance, every sign of approval disappears, you're left with only one source of power, inner meaning. Carl Jung once said, "Your visions will become clear only when you look into your own heart." Because everything you seek, love, peace, purpose, was never out there. It's always been here, within you. You just haven't been quiet enough to hear it. When you stop seeking understanding from others, you begin returning to yourself. You realize not everyone is capable of grasping the depth you've traveled. They only see the surface, the part that's easy to digest, easy to name. But you've gone to the places few dare to go, where fear, pain, and awakening intersect. I once met a man who lived in isolation after losing everything: his family, his job, his reputation. Years later, he told me, "At first I felt abandoned by the whole world. But when there was no one left to talk to, I began to listen to myself, and for the first time, I heard the voice of my soul." When the world grows silent, don't be afraid. That silence is an invitation to return, to the place where noise no longer controls you, where you no longer need to be understood to feel whole. Because not everyone will understand your path, and that's perfectly okay. You don't need them to. You only need to live in alignment with what you know is true. And one day, when you stand in the middle of life, not trying to be seen, not needing validation, you'll realize you're no longer seeking the light. You are the light. After walking through loneliness, failure, discipline, and silence, you'll suddenly understand that this journey was never about other people. Everything you thought you were facing, rejection, abandonment, misunderstanding, were only mirrors reflecting the parts of you that had yet to be loved. Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." That means the people who hurt you, the situations that broke you, they didn't come to destroy you. They came to reveal the fragments of your soul you've long abandoned. You're angry at someone for being distant. Look deeper. It's the fear of abandonment within you. You're hurt because no one recognizes your efforts. Ask yourself which part of you still longs for your inner parents to finally see you. You feel lonely in a crowd. Maybe it's time to stop doing things to be loved and start doing them from love. I once met a man who said, "I'm so afraid of being alone that I always need someone beside me. But no matter who I'm with, I still feel empty." After months of therapy, he realized the painful truth. He'd never truly been with himself. He had been running from emptiness, not realizing that within that emptiness was the doorway back to his soul. When you stop running and dare to look straight at the parts of yourself you've hidden, the anger, the wounds, the shame, you step into what Jung called integration of the shadow. No more blaming others. No more escaping yourself. And then, something miraculous happens. The pain that once broke you becomes your strength. The loneliness that once weakened you becomes the flame of your clarity. The heartbreak that once made you afraid to love becomes the door through which you finally love deeply. Not to fill a void, but from wholeness. When you stop seeking someone to heal you, you become the healer. When you stop running from the dark, you become the light. When you stop asking, "Why me?" you start asking, "What is this teaching me?" And in that moment, you are no longer a victim of life. You become the creator of your destiny. When you've learned to stand firm in solitude, when you no longer need comfort from others, when you stop complaining, stop waiting for approval, stop fearing failure, stop needing to be understood, stop running, you arrive at the final stage of the journey. Rebirth. It's not the return of who you were. It's the emergence of someone entirely new. A person once broken, now walking with a fearless heart. A soul once lost, now carrying its own light. Carl Jung once said, "No enlightenment comes from imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." And you've done that. You've turned your darkness into fuel. You've walked through the night of the soul and found yourself on the other side. You no longer need to prove anything to the world. No comparison, no competition, no need to be understood, loved, or saved, because you've realized that everything you sought in others, love, peace, trust, has been within you all along. Now, you no longer fear losing anyone, because you can't lose yourself anymore. You no longer fear beginning again, because you know each beginning brings you closer to your truth. You no longer fear silence, because you've learned, within that silence, your soul sings. And then the miracle happens. When you stop seeking someone to complete you, those who vibrate at your frequency naturally find you. Not because you need them, but because your energy has become an invitation. Not because you chase, but because you attract. Your relationships now are no longer places to escape emptiness. They are spaces where two whole souls walk together. No one rescues, no one carries. Just two beings, full, free, choosing to walk side by side. That is true love. Not born from lack, but from completeness. Not to possess, but to shine together. And you realize, everything that once hurt you was a gentle teacher. Every loss that once broke you was a lesson in growth. Everyone who left was simply returning you to yourself. Now, you no longer need to ask, "Who will stay with me?" Because you know, you are the one who will never leave yourself. And from that moment, life begins to open in an entirely new way. No longer a struggle to be seen, but the quiet unfolding of one who has found themselves again. That person is you when you stop searching outward. That person is you when you realize the sacred has been living within all along. And when you live from that place, calm, clear, and real, you no longer have to get through life, because you are life itself. Share this video if you feel something awakening within you, because maybe someone out there needs to hear these words, to know that they too are strong enough to rise. And if you're ready to begin the journey back to your true self, leave one word in the comments, ME. It may be a small commitment, but it's enough to awaken the strongest part of you, because from this moment on, you're no longer merely surviving. You are awakening, and the world will feel it.